Hi all. We are continuing the use case that I've explained in my earlier video. So here we have that exception understanding through Java code. I've already explained in the earlier video that we have a use case where there is an array of value, right? And we are going to access the array of value using an index. So right now, for that use case only, I've written a code. So there is a class called how exception works, and inside that there's a main method, and we have the array of string. We have created a string array, and there are a sequence of values being dropped into the string array. So the same value that we discussed in the use case. So we have Sundar Pichai, Steve Jobs, and Larry Page. Then I'm trying to print the values by accessing the indexing position of that array. And we are going to see how this program is going to be manipulated towards an exception scenario. So the first thing is we have this class called how exception works. So that's the first line, and that gets executed successfully. There's no problem in the line 1. That's success. The same in the method. There's nothing as a problem at the runtime. So the main method signature and the main method declaration is all perfect. There's no problem as of now. Now the next line, we have an array of value. As you can see, it's again success. It's pretty clear that there's no problem in the line number 3. So we have declared an array, and we have loaded some set of values into an array. Now coming to the next line, system.out.println, where we are trying to access an array. The array name is CEO, and we are accessing the array value using an index. CEO of 0. So we are accessing the 0th index. So as I already stated, that arrays are n-1 in its indexing position. So it starts with 0. So we are accessing the 0th index of this CEO array, and that line is success. And the output for that line is going to be Sundar Pichai. Now if you look at the next line, where we are trying to access the CEO of 2. So CEO of 2, which is nothing but the index position of 2. So 0, 1 and 2. 2 refers to Larry Page. In the string array, if you focus, that we have Larry Page in the index position 2. And that line is success. So the output is going to be Larry Page. It's pretty clear. But if you look at the next line, okay, where we have an access to the array using the indexing position of 3. Here where we have a challenge. The index position 3 doesn't exist in an array. We have 0, 1 and 2, but we don't have an index position called 3. If it's index position of 3, then typically there is 4 elements in it. But right now we have only 3 elements, right? There are only 3 elements in it, and we are trying to access the third element by using an indexing position of 2, because index is always n-1. Now this is at the runtime when the application is getting executed. Literally, this access of CEO3 cannot be traced by the compiler. Compiler can't trace and say, hey, you're accessing CEO of 3, which doesn't exist, because compiler doesn't have any clue about it. So compiler is not going to throw any error. But this program might end up as an error at runtime, and that's what we call it as an exception. So when the line number 6 is getting executed, the runtime environment is going to raise an error, and that's technically called as an exception. Why there's an exception occurring is because you are trying to access an index position that doesn't exist in an array. So ideally, this line is going to get failed. Now this particular line is where the exception occurs. So if you notice that this is the line, the 6th line is the position where the actual exception occurs, right? So what we have to do right now is, actually we should have protected this line number 6 or the whole line number 4 and 5 and 6 by having a proper exception handler, literally to say a try and a catch block, but we don't have neither one. So in this use case, then sure, the line number 6 is going to end up with an exception at runtime. Now what technically happens here? Your program gets terminated abruptly. Line number 7 is not going to get executed. That's what I was trying to explain on my analogy video. I was explaining that there is a fire in building 1, and if the fire is not getting handled with the fire handler, then the rest of the building is also getting impacted. That's what is going to happen here. Line number 6, which is facing an exception at runtime, is going to impact the line number 7. Line number 7 is not going to get executed. So line number 6 causes a failure. What type of a failure? Array index out of bounds exception. Technically, the exception name is array index out of bounds exception. We are going out of the bound of an indexing position, right? That's why this exception occurs, which is belonging to a lang package, java.lang package. Now, due to this issue of line number 6 at the runtime, your line number 7 is not going to get executed. Line number 7 goes unexecuted due to the failure of line number 6. Since there is a problem in line number 6, line number 7 is getting impacted. But technically, line number 7 is going to do some connectivity to the database store. But unfortunately, there is a problem in line number 6, and because of that, the connectivity to the database doesn't happen, and your program gets terminated abruptly. What we should have done right now is, we should have handled this scenario predicting that it might go wrong, because we are accessing through an indexing. We are positioning the indexing number through static way, right? We are not iterating them. The array is not iterated, neither iterated, nor we are not using any proper indexing positions here. We are using invalid index positions which doesn't exist in an array, and because of that, the problem occurs. So we should have predicted much earlier before the program gets executed, and we should have applied a proper try and a catch, and saying that if something goes wrong, you handle it with an array index out of bounds exception. And for that reason, the line number 7 would have got executed properly because you have a proper exception handler. So exceptions are something which occurs at runtime, and if you don't have a proper handler, then obviously it will end up with an program terminations abruptly, meaning is the rest of the program's statements are not going to get executed because of the earlier exception that occurred in the program. So this is an use case programmatically that we are understanding how an exception might occur and what if in case if you don't handle an exception. So if you look at this place here, why exception occurs, right? So that's which we are going to discuss more in detail in the next video. Thank you.